Mr Speaker.
Andrew Williams.
Mr Speaker, thank you very much. I take a call on behalf of New Zealand First with the Energy, Fuels, Levies and References Amendment Bill. And before I actually speak on the bill, I'd like to bring it into context in terms of referring back to the tax cuts of 2010 that this national government brought in, giving something like $2 billion back to the 10% of the most wealthy people in this country, the likes of John Key getting $1,000 a week back in tax, the likes of Paul Reynolds from Telecom getting $5,000 a week back in tax. Take that into context when this government then puts this report out which says, oh, we can't take this out of general taxation, we can't cover this out of the general funds because we can't afford that. But we can afford to give $2 billion back to the very people who can afford not to have those tax cuts because those are the National Party's mates. So in this respect, what we're seeing with this bill is a situation where once again the low to middle income earners in New Zealand, the people who can least afford it, will be paying more for their petrol on a daily basis through the pumps to once again prop up this government and to prop up this government's books. Now, Mr Speaker, at the present time, taking for instance an average of $2.20 per litre paid for petrol, the government takes in the order of 64 cents a litre in tax. 64 cents a litre out of $2.20. That's nearly 30%. So when New Zealanders are filling up, just think nearly a third of what they are paying is in tax. And of that 64 cents, and that excludes GST, 53 cents goes to the National Land Transport Fund, 9.9 cents goes to the ACC motor vehicle account, 0.66 cents goes to the local authority's fuel tax, and 0.045 goes to the petroleum or engine fuels monitoring levy. So the government's already taking significant funds. In addition, GST is collected on the overall price of fuel, including excise. The GST excise amounts to approximately 8 cents per litre. And every time, of course, the cost of fuel goes up, the amount of GST taken goes up. And in effect, the government is quite pleased when it sees the price of petrol going up because it sees its GST booty coming in at even greater levels. In addition to that, most New Zealanders wouldn't realise, but also 1 cent per litre is taken to pay for the emissions trading scheme that this government signed up to. So money is going offshore for us to pay into this overseas emissions trading scheme that started out at something like $23 or $24 per unit and has absolutely slumped down to now $2 or $3 a unit. And again, New Zealand was one of the first countries in the world to sign up to it, and this government wanted to be one of the leaders in it and all that sort of thing. And again, all that money to commit this country, and basically the scheme is an absolute falsehood. And in that particular situation, the emissions trading scheme is basically New Zealand hard-earned taxes and money that good, hard-working New Zealanders have earned is going overseas to traders and brokers and people who are making money out of our money. Now, I can understand why this government wants to get involved with this as well, because, you know, John Key was a money trader and was a money broker. And so it's many of his mates around the world who are involved in many of these schemes. And I can see why in this legislation it says meeting the stock holding obligation by building government-owned stock or by placing a mandate on industry to hold stock were considered as alternative options for meeting the stock holding obligations. However, these options were rejected because holding stock contracts is a more economical way of meeting the obligation. Very important phrase that. These options were rejected. In other words, it was rejected to keep our own stocks or to put pressure on the oil companies to ensure that they had sufficient arrangements to have stocks, whether it be onshore, offshore, or wherever they have their stocks, because it was determined in the legislation that holding stock contracts is a more economical way of meeting the obligation. And who will be holding those stock contracts? Well, these will be international brokers and these will be international agencies that are holding these contracts, and they will be making money out of it. They're not doing it for the fun of it. They're not doing it for the love of New Zealand. They're doing it to make money. And so once again, while good, hard-working New Zealanders are paying more through the pump to fill up their cars and their trucks and their buses and everything else, people around the world will be making money out of this. And this government prefers to do that. This government prefers people around the world to make money out of these contracts, to make money out of the emissions trading scheme internationally, and to make all this because the leader of the National Party comes from that background. He comes from the background in dealing in money and trading in money and being a broker. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there's many, many brokers and friends around the world who will do very nicely out of this arrangement. Mr Speaker, in the last year, the government has also advised that New Zealand motorists are going to have increases in fuel tax, 3 cents a litre per year over the next 3 years, going up. New Zealand First opposed this last year when it was brought in, and we said right then, why should people in Invercargill, Gore, the West Coast, down in Patea, everywhere, be paying for the roads of national significance, where the vast majority of those roads were north of Taupo. There was the odd road in Wellington, there was the odd road in Christchurch, but the vast bulk of it was north of Taupo, and particularly north of Hamilton and into the Auckland area. Why should people in the South Island be paying for all the Auckland and Hamilton roads? And why should they be increasing every year by 3 cents a litre to pay for that? Again, this national government doesn't care about the provinces. It doesn't care about the rural areas. It doesn't obviously care about its own farming supporters, federated farmers and all the farmers' supporters around New Zealand, because they're quite happy over the next 3 years to end up charging another 9 cents a litre for fuel, so that the roads of national significance, or as we've heard, the roads of national party significance, can be built. And so once again, good, hard-working Kiwis are going to pay through the nose, and it's going to cost them more. And Mr Speaker, New Zealand First has had enough of this. We've had enough of this. This government, it's a Robin Hood government. In this case, it takes from the poor and the middle income earners, and it gives to the rich. It gives the tax breaks to the wealthy, it gives the deals to the wealthy, it gives the concessions to the wealthy. It thinks nothing about giving a couple of $1 billion back to the wealthy, but when it comes to here to making sure we have security of supply of fuel in this country, it says, no, let's go after Joe Average in New Zealand and let's charge him. Even though he's already paying dearly $2.20 a litre and paying 64 cents a litre in tax at the present time to the government, let's go after him as well, because he's the easy target. They've got no choice in it. They've got no choice in it. Another 3 cents, another 4 cents, another 5 cents. They've got no choice in it. And Mr Speaker, that's got to come to an end. Mr Speaker, New Zealand First does not support this. We will be following this closely through to Select Committee, and we hope there are a huge amount of submissions on this, because once again the government is gouging, it is tax gouging, and it's taking advantage of good, average, hard-working Kiwis.
Mr Speaker.
Kanwal Bakshi.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's my pleasure to take a brief call on this Energy, Fuel Levies and References Amendment Bill and support this bill. Mr Speaker, it's very difficult to